One of the most enjoyable aspects of non-dual experience or unfiltered reality is that what is the only possible way it could be. There's nothing apart from what is. There's nothing second guessing. There's nothing that moves against reality. There's just the flow of reality, the flow of momentary experience. The word I'll use for this is equanimity. And when equanimity clarifies, it's very obvious. It's a huge relief generally. In fact, you could say that for the most part it is the mark of the end of suffering. Because we realize how much effort we've put into struggling with life, into trying to make life the way we think we need it or think we want it. And in doing so, continue to reinforce the sense that something's wrong. When we figure out the magic recipe, which is really non-doing, it's a deep trust in life itself, then things get very light. Life becomes very enjoyable. The innocence of childhood is regained. Although it's seen that it was never lost, it's just that we overlooked it by overcomplicating experience. So this movement toward equanimity, or this shift into equanimity that happens sometime after the initial shift of awakening, is an important one, and it shouldn't be overlooked. So as is common, the idea for making this video came from a few different discussions I've had with people over the last week or so. And I've had several questions around this topic from people who are working with this movement of equanimity, of looking into what it is that struggles with life, what it is that pushes against life, what it is in us, what is the conditioning pattern that causes us to mistrust life, to mistrust our moment-to-moment experience, even when we see that this is simply how it is. We can clearly see that this moment cannot be any other way. And yet we've habitually taught ourselves to run into our mind and imagine a future moment that feels somehow more comfortable than this moment does. And then we forget that we've taught ourselves to overlook the fact that this moment is really the only way it could ever be. And that this moment is the only moment we ever experience, because there aren't moments. There's only this. So, of course, it's not funny when you're going through it. It's very uncomfortable. When you have cleared away a lot of the beliefs, identity structures, delusions, and you just come face to face with this underlying resistance pattern of avoidance, often repressed emotion, struggle, and it's as if you just don't know how to stop struggling. So in this video, I wanted to address that situation and give a few pointers on what you can do to start to investigate the part of your experience that is conditioned or habituated to push against moment-to-moment life, moment-to-moment experience, and thus cause that sense of struggle, ongoing separation, and a general dysphoria. The starting place, of course, is recognizing what is. And what is immediately available in the 5 sense gates. There are the sounds, the sensations, the visual experience, the smells and tastes. These are your sense gates. These are your access to what is real, the world, the universe, the physicality of being alive. So it's very easy to remind yourself of what those actually are. And that is, put your attention into the senses one at a time and remind yourself that this is the only way it could be. This is the only thing that is right now. This is my access to right now. And then everything else is a thought. Granted, that the majority of what is going on in our experience oftentimes is thought and is sort of a reflection and recombination of the five sense gates. But it is thought nonetheless. So you could consider this almost a sixth sense, in that it's an experience, but it's a reflective experience. It's made out of a bunch of pieces of other experiences, but you have direct access to it, and that's consciousness. So this direct experience of consciousness, or thought consciousness, or thought stuff, is also in your immediate experience. And by putting our attention there, recognizing, oh, that's thought. Anything about what's happening, anything about the past, present, or future, about me or others, about situations, about choices, about patterns, causality, about spiritual principles, is thought. Only thought, just thought, right now. So that's thought stuff. That's consciousness. So what else is here? Nothing. That's not a concept. Anything else you come up with is going to be a thought. So once we recognize this and we hopefully allow ourselves to touch into each of these gates, each of these direct experiences, sight, sound, smell, taste, touch, and consciousness. And when I list these slowly, it's purposeful, is to give you an opportunity to actually put your attention in each of those spaces. That's the first step, recognizing what is. Now, once you've recognized what is, if you can just stay there, not move from there, not concoct anything, create anything, add anything or subtract anything, conjure anything in the mind, imagine it should be other, imagine it could be other, then you're done. That's equanimity. It's just that simple. And when equanimity comes online, it really is that simple. You see that anything else is delusion. Purposely concocting a reality that's not actual reality is delusion. It's fixation. It's choreographed. It's illusion. So this first step is very powerful. And you can do it anytime that the notion comes to you, or that the recognition that you're lost in thought comes to you, or the recognition that something's not right comes to you, which is also a thought. Whether there's a feeling, a sensation, an emotion, a situation, you can always come right back to presence through these 5 sense gates plus consciousness. Now, once you do that, if there's still some residue of struggle, of self apart, of I don't want this, of resistance or contraction, that's fine. That's not a problem. In fact, that's your pointer to equanimity. The very first movement of will, individual will, of avoidance, is your entry point. So don't overlook it. Be willing to feel it. Be willing to experience it directly. It won't be comfortable at first. In fact, often when you get to this place, to this point, you'll feel a lot of restlessness, a lot of wanting to run from this experience. That's okay. That's habituated or conditioned tendency. But over time, you'll get used to feeling into this, feeling into that primary avoidance, that initial intention to not experience this moment as it is. And you'll start to recognize its flavor, what it feels like. It will be a sensation. It'll be a sensation in the body. And it will also be a perception or the root of a perception in the mind that says no, and here's how I prefer it would be, and here's what I want to do about it. And 99% of that doing initially is mental. I want to imagine a better way. I want to imagine something beyond this moment, something that I can use as a pacifier to calm myself or to avoid the fear of this moment or sadness of the moment or shame. So that's the first movement away from this moment. And you're never moving away from this moment. It doesn't happen, but it's a hook that pulls us into the mind. It's what convinces us that we can somehow make a different choice by imagining or thinking about it than to just fully experience what's happening and notice the universal urge to choose, the natural flow of choice. So we go into a personal space, an imagined space, and in there we try to concoct a reality that's slightly more comfortable than this one is. Now, by the time we've gone that far, by the time we've gone into the thought field, into not now, not this, how it should be, how it could be, we've usually already overlooked that first sensation of personal will, of personal separate will that I was pointing to. So be aware, once you're already fantasizing, imagining, lost in thought, you've often overlooked that sensation, but you can backtrack to it. You can see that in this moment, this is what is happening, step one, including reminding yourself through direct experience, as I described. And here is what I want to be happening, which is something you're imagining, something the mind is concocting. And by the way, you're not doing this. You're not a guilty party. You're not trying to avoid life. There's not really anyone that's doing that. This is just habituated thought tendency. We're all born with it, or at least most of us are. As far as I can tell, almost all of us are. So the thoughts have a certain pattern, a certain flavor, and they hook attention, and then they pull attention into a thought stream. But there's no one doing that. You're not doing it. But you can notice it. So if you've already found yourself several steps down that thought stream, you can just backtrack and recognize, oh, I'm imagining things to be other than they are. I'm wishing, hoping, replacing what's actually happening with some mental image, a fantasy, a control fantasy. And then you can ask yourself, what is the underlying feeling? What is the experience that tells me I should do that or I have to do that? What have I become habituated to respond to go into my mind? And you'll feel it. It's often a certain location in the body, or again, a combination of a sensation or a pattern of sensations, and then a very fundamental belief that says, I have to do something about this. I have to respond or react. I have to change what is into what I want it to be, which is the illusion. Because this is just what it is. It can't be changed. We can only imagine our way into La La Land. But we can't actually change what's happening right now, can we? We can fully participate in it, and then the natural choices and course of flow of life is simple, easy, innocent, enjoyable. But we can't actually stand apart from this moment through imagination and change it into something that it's not. That's the fundamental movement we're talking about here. So once you're clear on that, then just allow yourself to feel that fundamental feeling of no, or of I don't want this like this right now. I want this to be different. And just sit with it. Feel into it. Look around, see, do I actually have to do something about this? Or can it just be what it is? A sensation and a sort of interpretation. But is there something that's truly compelling me to act? Whether that's an internal act or an external act, to react, to respond. Often with emotion, like anger or resentment, blame. And when you recognize that there is nothing actually there in the sensation that requires you to go into a deeper state of unconsciousness or hyperconsciousness through imagination, then you can just remain there with the experience. It's perfectly okay to just sit there with your attention in that experience that says, I don't like this. It's uncomfortable. I feel like I need to do something, but not reacting to it. Just letting it boil down to its physical essence, just a sensation. We're not trying to get rid of it. We're not trying to make it wrong. If anything, we're just exploring it to see if there's actually a trigger point. If there's actually something in this experience that causes us to go into imagination land. So at the beginning of the video, I described how equanimity, the peace, fluidity, and innocence of presence when we're not standing apart from it and struggling with it, is one of the more enjoyable aspects, or the most enjoyable aspect of non-dual realization. And it's true. But often you do have to go through this uncomfortable phase, this uncomfortable period, until you discover that you actually don't have to stand apart from life. You don't have to struggle with life. You don't have to struggle with yourself. You don't have to struggle with thoughts or emotions or situations. So be willing to just be a little bit uncomfortable, or at first it may be a lot uncomfortable. Learn to be okay with restlessness. And over time, this equanimity will clarify. You'll start to notice that you take reference not from what you think should be, as far as how to respond, communicate, what you think about, but instead you take reference from what is on an ongoing basis. And then there's perfect fidelity. There's nothing apart, nothing pulling, pushing, insisting, struggling, flailing. There's just what's happening, just what is.